Hey, everybody, wake up, Patriots. Hi, it's Larry Swikart in here for Ed Henry again on our Thursday morning chat. Happy to be here. Let me give you an overview of where we're going to go today. First of all, our biggest stories are going to be obviously the economic meltdown of late last week and Monday, the crash from which the stock market really has not quite recovered yet. Of course, we have the big story of Kamala Harris selecting Tim Walz, whom I'll have a great deal to say about in a while, as her running mate, VP, Minnesota governor. And then we've got riots in England over the stabbing of three girls, a fatal stabbing of three girls. A lot to get into there. We'll discuss a little bit of the polling halo. That's kind of the phrase being used now for Harris and her current polls. And then we will talk a little bit, if I have time. I'm not sure we got so much stuff, but if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about the success of the movie Deadpool and Wolverine and why that's so important and what happened with the recent Disney earnings call and earnings report that just came out. So let's go ahead and jump into all these topics. First, last week we had a ton of bad economic news. And I'm not just talking about the stock market crash. There was a lot of bad news last week. First of all, the thing that many people think sent the stock market into a tailspin was the bad jobs report. Something like 114,000 new jobs added. Just for the record, in the United States of America, with our population, to grow, to have a growing economy, you need between 400,000 and 450,000 jobs to be added per month. So you can see we're just a tad short there now, but it's much, much worse than that because of three factors. First, most of these jobs are government jobs. They're not real private sector jobs. In other words, if we take the government, as President Reagan used to say, we take the government out of all this, the economy looks like poopy caca. Second, most of these jobs are part-time. We're seeing a gig economy arise where people, just do this. Next time you are in an Uber, ask your driver what his real job is. The last 2 or 3 Uber drivers I've had, because it's a long drive to the Phoenix airport, about half an hour, and we talk. By the way, Uber drivers are much more likely to talk to you than taxi drivers. So anyway, we talk, and they all tell me, well, why'd you move to Phoenix? Well, I moved to Phoenix for this job with Intel or with some other company, but I got laid off a little while ago, or my hours were cut, so I'm driving an Uber. That's what else is happening with this 114,000 jobs. And then the third thing that they will never mention is that none of these jobs are going to Native Americans. And no, I don't mean Indians. I'm a Native American. Excuse me. I'm a Native American. I was born here. I'm talking about, well, I do mean Indians. I mean H-1B visas and to non-Native Americans, some to illegal immigrants if they work. So just right, I guess I could add a fourth component to why this report's so horrible. Because folks, what they do in about 2 weeks after they issue every one of these jobs reports. They said, oh, we had to revise it down. Every month they revise these down. So I doubt that you're going to see 114,000 jobs actually be out there. But even if they were out there, A, they'd be real low. B, they're going to be part-time jobs. C, they're going to be going to foreign-born people. So the jobs report shocked the country. Because if you remember back to the last one, I don't know if you do, it's a lot of numbers, but the last one was big. I can't remember. It was 300,000 something, I think. And of course, they revise that down. But all the Biden people, all the Democrats are, oh, see, we're over the hump. We've got it now. We're back in the saddle again. Remember the old, no, you don't. Most of you are too old to remember Gene Autry. He used to have a song called Back in the Saddle Again. Anyway, they thought they were on their way, and they really aren't going that way at all. So that was the first real big piece of bad news in the economic front last week. Second piece of bad news. Throughout the week, a host of stories began to appear about big retailers in trouble. There was a story over the main hoax news, Yahoo or whoever it was, about retailers in trouble. But more specifically, several of the, I guess what we call big box stores, like Best Buy, Container Store, several of these stores, these companies, announced they're rethinking their business model toward smaller stores. Well, the whole concept of these guys was big box. We have everything you ever need in containers or in electronics or whatnot. So if they get smaller, how much of a competitive advantage do they have over the old mom and pop stores? I mean, the whole reason they were able to succeed and thrive was that they could outcompete a mom and pop store because they had everything there. So just follow that. Then the CEO of Wayfair, another retailer, said that the retail climate to him looked like 2008. And if you remember 2008, it weren't pretty. It was a bloodbath, to use the in vogue phrase right now. So this is all looking very bad. Finally, Big Lots, who is a major competitor to Home Depot, announced they were going to shutter over 300 stores. So, I mean, that's sort of the last step before bankruptcy, right? They're in big trouble. So you combine all that news now with the news of the way underperforming jobs report, and you got signs of a economic malaise. I won't say crisis yet. I don't think we're at the crisis stage. And by the way, as you may know, my idol in doing any of this was the great Rush Limbaugh. And one thing about Rush was, for the most part, once in a while he kind of hid his feelings, but for the most part, he was totally honest about where he thought things were. Remember his line, I'll tell you when it's time to panic. Well, anybody who knew Rush, who listened to him over the course of 2 decades, knew he was never going to panic. For him, because of his faith, especially toward the end, there was never a time to panic. And there isn't. There's never a time to panic. But I don't think it's time to panic, and I don't think that we're at a crisis now. But I do think that all of these indicators piled up. And that's why the market sank about 900 points on Friday. It recovered about 200. But then on Monday, it sank another 1,100 and recovered about, 400 or 500. At any rate, when I last looked, the market was at 38,700. And when Trump left office, it was at almost 31,000. So that's not a lot of growth for 4 years, especially supposedly for the post-pandemic boom. Now, there were some other things happening, and I don't know if you knew about these because they're not here in America. But even before our Dow and S&P sank, the Nikkei index in Japan sank big, had a big crash. And in South Korea, trading got so bad that they had to halt trading. So internationally, there's a lot of concern. Germany, because of its idiotic green policies that it still refuses to give up on, Germany is deindustrializing. And they're going to barely have any economic growth at all this year. The number I heard was under 1% growth from Germany. That's kind of shocking. If you pay attention to foreign markets and where the Germans have been, the Germans and the Japanese, until the advent of communist China being a economic power, Germany and Japan were it. They were our competitors. So for Germany to show no economic growth is shocking. And what's even more shocking is they don't seem to care. They would rather their businesses go out of business than violate their sacred green covenant with God Gaia or whoever it is they pray to over there. So that's going on. Now there's still more. Last week, the U.S. debt, not our deficit. The deficit is what we owe. We overspend every year. What we overspend every year is our deficit. When you add all that overspending up over time, that's our national debt. And our national debt hit 35 trillion last week. The interest on our national debt now is more than what we spend on defense. I mean, that should wake you up this morning, Patriots. That should be a wake up, Patriots. Now, I do want to add this. The numbers you hear on the national debt are the stated numbers. They are not what we really owe. If you add up all the obligations, they're called unfunded debt obligations. If you add all those up, some of you might want to cover your ears here. It's way over 115 trillion. They just don't act like these are unfunded. I'm talking about, for example, Social Security, which right now has a positive balance, but we all know that without major changes, that's going to be negative before too long. Now, I know we've all heard Social Security's going broke. We've heard that all our lives, and it still hasn't. But there are trend lines that seem to be unavoidable. And if we don't raise the age of those when you start receiving Social Security, and if we don't start raising taxes on the Utes, we're going to have a problem. And that's part of that unfunded obligations. The other part is Medicare. The Medicare program is in the red all the time, and nobody wants to talk about it. Now, by the way, since we're talking about the Utes and Social Security, of course, the best thing you could possibly do would be to privatize much of it, if not all of it. But this is suicide if you're a politician, because people immediately think you're, quote, taking away their Social Security. That's not what it means at all. Good plans for doing this involve a simple step-by-step transition, whereby you start with people who aren't going to get Social Security right now. Let's say somebody who's 16, and anybody who's born after, who's 16 years old today, and born after that, they will only get 80% of today's Social Security payouts. And then anybody who's 10 today, after that, they will only get 60%. And you stair step it downward till finally you have nobody getting Social Security payouts except as an option. So after about age 5 or whatever it is, anybody who's 5 years old or older after this, they're only going to get about 20% in Social Security, and the rest they have to plan for. Now, there are ways, I hate making anything mandatory, but there are ways you could make this mandatory. So you either have to go on Social Security, or you have to, it would be mandated, you would have to invest in, say, one of 10 private money market accounts that you may not take any funds out of until age 65. In other words, the same rules that we use on Social Security, but they are used on private money market accounts. Now, I'm sure you've seen these numbers. If you had your money in a private account, even with the 2008 crash and even what we're going through now, and you had it there for the last 30 years, what you have in your Social Security fund would be quadrupled, tripled at least. I've seen some numbers where they'd be almost 100% more. So going more private would actually save us a lot of money and give recipients a lot more money. But of course, this is nearly impossible. President Bush tried to do this in the slightest way back in 2005. He came in with what he thought was a mandate from Americans. He didn't talk about Social Security, but he thought he had enough support from Americans he could do this. And he wanted to privatize 2%. 2%, that's nothing. But not of all your Social Security funds, just of the half of the Social Security funds that you put in. Okay, so 2% of half is 25%, right? 50% of 2%. So, in other words, nothing. Nothing. I mean, it was what it was an attempt by President Bush to begin the necessary and long transition to a more privatized system. Now, I bet you didn't know this. You ready for this? You have your recording on. You know who first suggested privatizing Social Security? The great Franklin D. Roosevelt. In his 1935 Social Security speech, where he laid out the Social Security plan, step 4 was, he said, and we should eventually move everybody into private annuities. That's money market accounts, right? Yeah, Roosevelt said that. Look it up. Go look at the original Social Security speech. So anyway, a little off topic in Social Security, but some other indicators as to why the market is so skittish. Warren Buffett dumped a whole bunch of his Apple stock. That had people concerned. And Intel laid off 15,000 employees, and that had people concerned. And then we may get into this more toward the end of the show if I have time, but Disney had an earnings call on Monday, really early, which they don't usually do. They're trying to hide something. What are they trying to hide? Disney said their park revenue is down. You have to understand that their movies have been losing money like crazy, with the exception of a few, such as the most recent Deadpool Wolverine's making a ton of money, and Inside Out 2 made a ton of money. But before that, they had 7 or 8 horrible flops. And their entire Star Wars streaming division is just terrible and losing money. So Disney has been relying on their parks for all of their revenue to offset these horrible movies. Well, Iger had to come out yesterday and say, by the way, guys, the parks lost money. Now, if you've been to a Disney park in the last 4 or 5 years, you know why. The prices are out of sight. They're just incredible. I mean, you've seen different estimates, and it kind of depends on how you put some of these things together. But if you have a family of 4 and you go to Disney World and you get their main package, I think it's about $250 per person. But that's not enough, because if you want to ride the good rides, Big Thunder Mountain, Space Mountain, Indiana Jones. Do they have that one in Florida? No, they don't. They don't have any. They have Indiana Jones in California, and they have the time travel thing at Animal Kingdom. But any what they used to call Splash Mountain, they had to get rid of some of that, right? Any of the good rides, what they used to call back in the day the A-ticket rides, you have to have an app on your phone. And at the beginning of the day, you have to get up and reserve what rides you want to ride so that you don't wait in an hour and a half long line. Now, you can wait in that line, but you're only going to get 4 or 5 rides in the day, right? After you factor in walking, eating, looking at something that's free once in a while. So basically what they want you to do is get up at 7 in the morning and get on your phone and start reserving your rides on this app, which you have to pay for. So by the time you pay for that app, by the time you pay for the 4 park tickets, I'm not even talking food, I'm not talking transportation, I'm not talking hotel, I'm not talking about getting down there. Just the park and the apps are going to cost a family of 4 almost $1,000. Now, by the time you add all this other stuff in, you're easily looking at a $5,000 vacation for a family of 4. And most Americans can't afford that. So all of that is what is behind the crash, the downturn earlier this week. Now, with all that happening, do you think you might want to diversify your portfolio just a little bit? If your stock portfolio goes down 40, 50%, mightn't it be good to have some gold and silver? So you might want to think about that with our friends over at Colonial Metals Group. They can provide you with gold and silver. They can, physical gold and silver. They can provide you with a special self-directed IRA in metals. They can help you out. Call them up right now, 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034. And they will set you up, depending on the account you choose, with a free safe for your physical metals. It's always good to hold some physical metals in your house. And with your account, they'll set you up with $10,000 in silver to start your account, depending on the kind of account you get. So call the guys at Colonial Metals, 800-805-4034, and don't be caught flat-footed the next time the market crashes or goes down, because it is going to. The economy is creaky right now. I'm not saying it's collapsing. It isn't. And by the way, the fundamentals are still in place for when President Trump comes in. This economy can take off like a skyrocket. I was doing a podcast yesterday with David Blackman, who focuses on energy. And all of the Biden executive orders can be undone with the stroke of a pen by President Trump on day one, and the energy can start flowing. And the very first thing that will affect inflation and bring inflation down is to lower your fuel prices, whether it's gas, whether it's the fuel for container ships and airplanes, whether it's the energy needed to produce the packaging and the shipping for your foods. You lower the cost of energy, and this nation's economy is going to explode. Not to mention all the other stuff Trump can do. All right. Topic number 2, Harris's vice presidential selection governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, or as the people in Minnesota call him, Tampon Timmy, because I don't know if you remember this, but he ordered that tampon machines be installed in boys' bathrooms. This guy is a lunatic leftist. He makes Harris look almost like Milton Friedman. I mean, this guy is just absolutely out there. Why did she pick him? A couple of theories. One theory is this is a big FU to Barack Obama. This is Harris telling Obama, butt out. I don't need your help. I don't need your advice. I know how to run a campaign. And because Obama was strongly opposed to this pick. He wanted Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, which I'll get into in a minute. So she chose Tampon Timmy. We're going to have to get, somebody's got to do a remake of that Brownsville Station song. Remember that one? Smoking in the boys' room. Tampons in the boys' room. Right? Somebody's got to do that one. So this is a case of you've got a really bad guy as governor, but nobody notices it because it's just a governor. And if all the Somalis in Minneapolis want to vote for this lunatic, because why would they vote for him? Because he did nothing in the George Floyd riots, did nothing. Just let them burn stuff. It's okay. They need to let off steam. They never seem to let off steam at the governor's mansion. But anyway, so he's popular in Minnesota. But once you become a national candidate, things change. And immediately people start looking not just at your record, but at your whole life. And you might remember that. I keep saying that. I'm sorry, guys. I forget. I'm an old dude. But in 1972, George McGovern was the Democrat candidate, and he selected Missouri Senator Thomas Eagleton as his running mate. Well, Eagleton had a history of mental issues, to the point that back then, I don't know if they still do this, but back then, he had been subjected to shock therapy because of his brain problems. This isn't exactly the kind of guy you want with the finger on the nuclear codes, but of course we have that now with the demented pervert, but nevertheless, back then that was just unthinkable. So McGovern had to ditch Eagleton after already naming him as his VP, because the scrutiny is so much heavier once you become a national candidate. Well, the same thing here. Now it's coming out that Walz, who was in the Minnesota National Guard, he had signed a 6-year deal with the National Guard. He was going to serve for 6 years. And he resigned or retired after 4 years, just before his unit deployed for Iraq. Now, that's bad enough because he keeps making speeches where he says things like, the AR-15, we don't need that when I carry that in war. He was never in a war. So Trump's VP, J.D. Vance, has called this shameful and stolen valor. And it's a big deal. I mean, yes, you can say, well, it's Twitter and things are blowing up on Twitter and social media, but they really are. And it's hard to get away from it, to the point that I'm having all sorts of people contact me and saying, he's going to have to resign, won't he? She's going to have to pick somebody else. I don't know. And I'll get into the clock, my favorite topic here, in just a minute. But it gets worse for Walz because he apparently is saying that he, and I'm quoting here, his battalion deployed in Operation enduring freedom in Afghanistan. Now, he very carefully worded that by saying his battalion deployed, because he did not. He was stationed in Italy and didn't come anywhere close to flying bullets or shrapnel or, Muslims firing RPGs at his fat tail section. So, while technically he's okay on that statement, the overall implication is, once again, he is engaging in stolen valor. He's trying to make it look like he's some sort of war hero. And he wasn't. He didn't want to have anything to do with the war. This is really going to hurt him. Now, if he had just said this one time, you can always use the old Biden slip of the tongue. Oh, he just misspoke. That's the famous Washington phrase. Misspoke, right? But Richard Barris said earlier today that he has friends who've been on the campaign trail with him, and he says this all the time. This is a common saying. So, what's going to happen with it? If this is just an issue of Harris trying to stiff arm Obama, say, beat it, I'm running my own campaign. If that's all this is, then it's a clear example of how incredibly incompetent Kamala Harris is. That she didn't do the work on this, that she didn't really get into the details or bother to look at who this guy really was. If it's something else, well, what else could that be? Well, most people thought she was going to take Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and that would have made a lot of sense, because Shapiro probably would have been good for at least 1 point for her in Pennsylvania, which she desperately needs. Most polls today have Trump up in Pennsylvania. Most polls have him down in Minnesota, anywhere from a couple of points to 5 or 6 points. Barris, in his polling, has always said that Minnesota polls far left of where it actually votes. In 2010 and 2020, for example, Barris had Biden winning Minnesota by 10. He only won by 2. Trump always under polls. So, in essence, in the Democrats' mind, they took a guy to solidify and save Minnesota because they're concerned about Minnesota, as opposed to playing offense and getting a guy who might help get them Pennsylvania, which they absolutely need. In other words, I see this as a totally defensive move. They're playing defense. They're not on offense. But we'll see. But something else came out about Shapiro this week, and that was this. He interviewed, obviously, for the job, but was he interviewing Harris or was she interviewing him? And the way the stories are unfolding, it looks as though Shapiro was interviewing Harris, and that he didn't like what he saw or what he heard, and that he backed out. She did not choose him. He said, I don't think I'm going to do that. Now, remember earlier, Gretchen Whitmer, or as I call her, Witless Protection, in Michigan had already backed out. And Harris desperately needs Michigan. What's going on there? Well, in addition to the fact that I think these people up close and personal saw how incredibly incompetent and what a bad candidate Harris is, I think on top of that, they didn't want to go down with the ship. Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer have national aspirations in 2028. They want to run for president 2028. And if you're part of a losing team, it doesn't look so good. Nobody wants to be part of a loser. So, which, by the way, is why I've said for some time Kerry Lake is having problems in Arizona. Because once you've lost, I don't care how unfair it was. I don't care if the election was stolen. None of that matters. There are people whose attention to politics is minimal. And when they see that L behind somebody's name, they go, oh, well, she's a loser. Fair or unfair, that's what happened. So Whitmer and Shapiro did not want that L behind their name. Other names that keep getting brought up, even though she's made her selection, are Mark Kelly of Arizona. And I even had some people suggest that at the convention, they're going to remove Harris. She's already been nominated, and put in Mark Kelly and Shapiro. Once again, if they're watching the polls, there's absolutely no guarantee that ticket would win against Trump. There's a great likelihood it would lose. Number two, I'm here in Arizona. I don't ever hear anybody talk about Mark Kelly, good or bad. He's a non-entity. He's never seen here. He's never seen doing anything here. He got elected for two reasons. One, his wife was Gabby Giffords, who got shot, and he got all that sympathy vote from the liberals. And two, well, he ran against Martha McSally, who was probably the weakest candidate in Arizona history. And I've been here a long time. McSally was terrible, and he only won by 2 points. So I'm just telling you, if you hear these claims that they're going to pull Harris at the convention and put in Mark Kelly or Josh Shapiro or somebody else, I don't see how they gain anything in any of that. But B, so I want to get to my favorite hobby horse here. The clock is ticking. And North Carolina starts voting in 30 days. Well, folks, the ballots have to be printed. I'm sorry, there are realities that counties, not the state and not the dang DNC, counties print the ballots. And the counties have to give the ballots to every candidate on the ballot in advance so they can proofread their name and their position. I'm Joe Blow, and I'm running for county sheriff, not dog catcher, right? This takes time. Ballots have to be printed, takes several days to print the ballots and mail them out to all of the people on the ballot. Then it takes several days for all those people to check them and return them, even if you say we need them returned within 3 days after you receive them. So if North Carolina is going to start voting in 30 days, those ballots already have to be going out with Harris and Walz's name on them. You don't have another 2 weeks. You wait 2 more weeks and switch her out again, do some sort of idiot thing like that. You're going to have such confusion in the ballots. And there will be, believe me, GOP lawsuits saying, no, this was the ballot. People voted for Harris Walz, not Harris Kelly, or not Kelly Shapiro. Any change in this is going to result in such massive chaos that in many states, for example, Ohio, a discrepancy between the names on the early ballot, absentee ballot, and the general election day ballot, the early ballots are kicked out. They only accept the election day ballots. This would result in a Trump 435 electoral vote landslide if you split the names on the ballot. That's why I think they have no intention of trying to remove Harris or Walz. I think they're stuck with both of these guys. Well, again, we're facing some tough financial times. Make sure you're diversified. Make sure you have a safety net of metals, gold and silver, and let our friends over at Colonial Metals Group help you out with that. They have something called a self-directed IRA. Self-directed means you direct it. You get to say how much of your portfolio you want in silver, how much in gold, other metals, I suppose, copper, whatnot. And you can withdraw at any time. It's not like some of these plans where you can't ever get your hand on your own money. So check them out, Colonial Metals Group, and let their experts help you out. If you take one of their special programs, they will set you up with a safe for your physical metals, and they will set you up with $10,000 in free silver. So check them out. Call them at 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034. All right. Our third big topic here is England. London has fallen. I know that's the name of a movie, but it's also what's really happening in England. London has fallen. A Rwandan immigrant, and they weren't reporting whether or not he was a Muslim deliberately. A Rwandan immigrant stabbed and killed 3 girls ages 6 to 9 at a Taylor Swift themed party and injured several others. Now, of course, the hoax news media, especially in England, folks, you got to understand, if you think our hoax news media is bad, the hoax news media, the Guardian and the Telegraph and some of these others in England are utterly horrible. Even the UK Daily Mail, which is pretty good on many things, it's all in for the Uke war. They're very much controlled by the state, if not directly. They're so influenced that they can't report anything what the state wants. The last thing the state wants is for this guy to be found to be an immigrant who's a Muslim. So they're saying he's not an immigrant. He was born in Wales. His parents were immigrants. He's Rwandan. Come on, man. So there were initial reports that this was, of course, what it was, a terror attack. And the police rushed out and said, oh, no, this wasn't terror related. So this is what you're going to see. I'm just telling you, when you look around on their media, or you even see reports in our media that are coming from them, you got to be very careful because they're flat out lying. So anyway, protests and riots broke out in this, I think it's called Southport, which is a beach city. And people were freaked out, not just in this case, but by the fact that recently there are all sorts of reports of Muslim men in gangs going through various cities in England with hammers and knives and looking for anyone who opposes immigrants. So now you're not allowed an opinion. You're not allowed to oppose illegal immigration. Well, it's legal there, but you know what I mean. So it got worse from the standpoint that the cops began to arrest people in the UK, in England, home of the Magna Carta. They began to arrest people for tweeting or retweeting information that immigrants were a problem or that immigrants were involved in this, which they were. Okay. They were holding vigils and protests, and the cops, of course, were arresting the English who were protesting against all this stuff. It's really quite something. So England is in very bad shape. They even started trying to extradite people abroad who were tweeting or writing about the problems of these immigrants. England, can you believe this? So my message to you is be careful about what you read. I got some things up, and immediately I could see how biased they were. They went out of their way to not say this guy was a Muslim. They went out of their way to say, oh, he was born in Wales. Again, irrelevant if his family's illegals or his family's immigrants. In other words, they're trying to say this wasn't an immigrant hate crime, which it was. So the government and the police in England are in on it. The new left-wing, utterly communist Starmer, I think is his name, is the prime minister. The last guys were bad, but this guy's just terrible. So England is in bad shape. They have an immigration problem, and they still officially don't know or don't admit that they have an immigration problem. By the way, Muslims went on a rampage. Nobody heard about this. They went on a rampage in India against Hindus and were burning Hindu stores and killing Hindus. And it's interesting that Kamala Harris theoretically is a Hindu. And she said nothing about any of this. Why? Because the Democrats cannot alienate that Muslim base in Minneapolis and Dearborn, Michigan, if they want to have any hope whatsoever of winning this election. If they lose the Muslim vote, I mean, to the point where it's not just they don't turn out, but they actually turn out and vote for Trump, it's all over. So that's a big deal. All right, let's take a look at the next topic we had, which was the polling halo. The polling halo. Now, remember a couple of weeks ago, I alerted you guys to a memo put out by Trump's pollster, Tony Fabrizio. And he said then, watch out, we're going to have 3 or 4 weeks of really good polling for Harris. It has nothing to do with where she really is in the polling. It has to do with the fact that the hoax news media and the pollsters have reverted to pre-2016 levels. Remember how in 2016, Trump almost didn't lead in any polls. I think he led in 5 out of the last 23 polls, and then only by about 1. So they've gone full hoax polling here. And Fabrizio said it's going to last through the convention. So I'm here to tell you guys, again, I'm going to tell you the truth. Buckle up. You're going to have about 2 more weeks of bad news. It's going to appear to be bad. It's not really, but you're going to think it's bad news because it's going to look like it's bad polling for Trump. There's one that came out today, general polling. Harris is ahead in general polling, right? The overall RCP now has Harris up by a fraction of a point. However, already her polling is starting to fade. Basham, the guy who runs Democracy Project, he does regular polling. He has Trump up 3 in Michigan, 2 in Pennsylvania, 4 in Wisconsin. Now, I buy the 2 in Pennsylvania. I think that's probably right. But I don't buy 3 in Michigan or 4 in Wisconsin. I think both those are going to be 1-point states, 1.5. But still, I do think Trump is up. However, a Marquette University poll in Wisconsin came out, and it had Trump up 1 in Wisconsin. So I think that the polling is beginning to shift. But let me remind you, you're going to see a lot of polling that looks really good for Harris. And why does it look good? Barris explained this on his show yesterday, and 3 of the pollsters, including economists, and I think YouGov is one of them, 3 of them are using the same exact poll or the same exact data set. They are just reweighting it differently, okay? But they didn't go out and do separate polls and get separate numbers. They're using the same set. So you think you're looking at 3 different polls that are showing Harris up or doing really well. You're not. You're looking at one poll that's been reweighted several different ways. The Harris rally that they had, that supposedly had her in front of thousands of people, it was a country and western annual festival they already had with this guy named Bon Iver, who I guess is a country star, and she appeared. The same thing happened with Megan Thee Stallion last week. They did a rally for Harris, but it was a Megan Thee Stallion concert that Harris showed up at. And after Megan Thee Stallion was done and Harris showed up, people left. So don't be fooled. She isn't drawing crowds. It's just more lies and more garbage. Then she did a rally in Detroit, and apparently they totally screwed this up too, and there were thousands of people who were left without shuttles. I guess all the shuttle drivers just went home and left people without the ability to get back to their cars, and it took them 2.5 hours to get to their cars. So yeah, real top flight operation there by Harris. A few other polling notes. In Montana, Tim Sheehy now apparently has a 2-point lead over John Tester, a big race. We win that one, we got the Senate, because we're going to win West Virginia. So that's a flip of 2 right there, whether or not we win Arizona or Ohio. Youngkin, Governor Youngkin, has ordered the removal of non-citizens from Virginia's rolls. Now, that could be very big, because that could flip Virginia by itself. Georgia had 2 different rulings last week, the most recent of election integrity, the most recent of which was to have the mail service provide tracking information on absentee and early ballots that are sent in. That's huge. So you can find out if they're coming from illegal, like a nursing home that has no patients in it, stuff like that. Oh, and Harris said that she would be open to ending arms sales to Israel. You wait till that sinks in. There will be a point, I don't know what it is, but there will be a point at which American Jews go, no mas, no mas, enough. We're not doing this anymore. So that's where we are with all the polling. Now, remember, it's important for you guys to diversify your portfolios. If we see another crash, it may not be pretty. We don't want to get back to 2008. If you remember that, you needed to have something besides stock market, right? Stocks and bonds. So you might want to consider Colonial Metals Group and let them talk to you. Get one of their special advisors to set you up with a self-directed IRA where you can withdraw the metals, the gold, the silver, whenever you want to. You won't have to fiddle around. Yeah, I got it, but I can't get to it, which is where it is with many of these metals companies. So let a team at Colonial Metals help you out with that. In one of their packages, they will set you up with a free safe and $10,000 in free silver. So talk to them at Colonial Metals Group, 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034. All right. I wanted to get to this because I think it's pretty important. And not just because, I like movies. And I especially like superhero movies. I grew up with comic books. I had the first #1 Spider-Man. I had #1 Fantastic Four. I had #1 X-Men. I missed the #1 Avengers somehow, but I had the #2 Avengers. And kept them all the way until I had to go on the road with rock bands and could no longer afford them, and B, no longer had access to comic stores where I could regularly go in, and C, I couldn't transport them with me, right? We had no room for that stuff. Well, so recently, last week, the latest Marvel movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, came out. Now, a couple of things you need to understand about this. There are many stars and Marvel intellectual properties that came from Fox and Sony before the Fox merger with Disney. And those are different from the Disney Marvel Comics universe. They have a lot of the same branding, the same opening themes and so forth, but really they're quite different. And for the most part, the Sony and old Fox shows had very, very little wokeism at all. There was a line in Spider-Man No Way Home about how the Washington Monument was built by slaves, something like that. But by and large, compared to either the Marvel Comics universe, now known as the MCU instead of the MCU, it's the Marvel She universe, because they're trying to replace all the male characters with women. So you had Deadpool and Wolverine that are part of that other intellectual property. And because Sony had X-Men, which is Wolverine. So I was not enthused about going to this movie. I actually didn't want to go. My son wanted to go, and my wife wanted to see Twisters. So she was away at the time. So I said, okay, well, I'll have to wait till she gets back to see Twisters. So we go see Deadpool, Wolverine. And I'd seen both previous Deadpools. I loved the first one. I thought the second one was a little That's why it was not so hot to see it. Folks, this is a laugh a minute. Yes, it's vile. It's crude. It's got a lot of profanity, but it is hysterical. The opening fight scene where they interpose the credits is one of the best opening 5 minutes of any movie since Saving Private Ryan. I mean, it is awesome. And it's one long running joke about how bad Disney is. So if you don't like Disney, you're going to want to see this movie because they're constantly taking jabs at how Disney screwed up and how Deadpool is really going to save the whole company and the franchise, which would be ironic because Deadpool, of all the Marvel superheroes, is one of the very least known. Nobody knows who Deadpool is. And Wolverine, while well known, has never been my favorite X-Men. I didn't like the character when they first introduced him. I loved the original X-Men. I didn't like Wolverine. I know I'm one of the few. It's okay. I understand. But it's so ironic if these two are the ones who save Marvel. So in its opening weekend, this movie did almost $1 billion. $1 billion. I mean, it's profitable after one weekend, which of course is the goal of any good movie, is to be profitable after your opening worldwide weekend. But I have a feeling that word of mouth is going to make this, dare I say it, maybe a $2 billion movie. I don't know. But what's also interesting is that, and I'm not going to give you the names, but there are cameos by previous Fox, Sony superhero stars of their own movies and series that you're going to love. That's all I can say without giving too much away. But the jokes that they make around these characters are exceptionally funny. So the word was, and if you're interested in this, the people you want to follow are Critical Drinker, who does reviews, fantastic reviews. I've never found one I really disagreed with. Critical Drinker. Vigilant Renegade. Vigilant Renegade is a specialist in film financing, and he understands how much movies cost, what they need to have to break even, what's happening with paying stars, and so Valiant Renegade. Sorry, I think it's Valiant Renegade. And Dr. Doomcock is the third guy. I'll have to get you his web address next time. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Sorry, Doc, I don't remember it. But these guys do a very good job at analyzing film financing and so forth. Anyway, the word came down in their podcast that a Disney insider who was there said that Kevin Feige, F-I-E-G-E, he has been the genius who ran the whole Marvel universe up through Avengers Endgame. Brilliant, brilliant guy. Well, he thought he could go a different direction with the Marvel 4 and 5 iterations, which were disasters, just horrible. All of these streamings that just didn't do very well. Anyway, word was, here's what I want to get to. Feige fired all of the activist directors and producers at Marvel and said, we're going to go back to making money with movies like Deadpool and Wolverine. And this is before Deadpool and Wolverine started making money. So just something to keep in mind is that maybe that part of Disney has turned the corner. Now, realistically, you got to remember, movies are in the pipeline sometimes for 5-10 years. So it's not going to happen overnight. But I think somebody at Disney finally got the message that they have a problem. Well, folks, as always, it's been great talking with you. And I want to remind you about the Wild World of History and our incredible history curriculum for high schoolers in both U.S. history and world history. The U.S. history course is 22 units. It tracks perfectly with Patriots history of the United States, 22 chapters, 22 units, and I teach every single chapter in high production video with maps and charts and graphs, all of it available to you. The videos are 45 minutes to an hour long each. I cover what's in the chapter, but I also introduce some new stuff in each video. No license to expire. It's all digital, downloadable, and it's yours as long as you need it, with as many kids as you need. The world history course, same thing. 15 units, big units, videos a little bit longer, and all taught in video as well as books and writing. You're going to love these. wildworldofhistory.com. If you want more political commentary, go to my Wild World of Politics and sign up for the Insider, and you'll get me talking politics 3 days a week at the Wild World of Politics Insider. So check out these websites. Remember, you can still get both my books, Patriots History Globalism, Patriots History of the United States, History of the United States, autographed and shipped to you at the website. So great stuff on there. All my books are on there, and all my movies, including Rock on the Wall and Other Walls to Fall. So you're always, make sure you take a trip over there. And please scroll way down on the history site and sign up for the newsletter. You do so, we're going to send you a free copy of the 20th anniversary edition of Patriots History of the United States, which is a new chapter in PDF form that goes from 2018 to 2023. All the good stuff, all the great years in there. So we'll send you that free. Just make sure you sign up for the newsletter. And I will see you guys back here next Thursday.